Let's shift gears for you now. The South African Human Rights Commission has wrapped up the KZN leg of its investigations into the July civil unrest that grips parts of KZN and Gauteng. The investigation seeks to probe the week-long violence which resulted in over 350 deaths, some allegedly as a result of racial profiling in some communities. The scope of the hearings includes investigating the lack of law enforcement, the role of private security companies, and speculation that the unrest was actually orchestrated. The Gauteng leg of the hearings is due to start in February next year. For more insight, let's bring in the South African Human Rights Commission CEO, Advocate Tseliso, who joins us now via our video link. And Advocate Thipanyane, it's great to have you on the program. Thank you so much indeed for making time. With the benefit of hindsight, what do you reckon we're able to make of what actually took place in KZN, given the hearings so far? In other words, do you feel we've been able to make headway around what actually took place in those 8 days in July?
Good morning to you and to your viewers. We have certainly made good progress, and we're really happy with what we've achieved so far. I think for us, what is really important is that, one, there needs to be public accountability. And I think this hearing is definitely providing a forum for South Africans to hear for themselves as to exactly what went wrong and what will be done to ensure that this tragedy never happens again. In terms of the Constitution, if you look at Section 205, there are 4 functions which the state is responsible for. One is public order. 2 is to protect our people in terms of their lives and property. 3 is to uphold and enforce the law. But secondly, lastly, to prevent crime. So certainly this tragedy was a failure in that regard as far as the role of the state. That's why we've lost so many lives and so much property damaged. So we need to get a clear sense from the government what happened. Why could we not prevent this thing from happening? And once it happened, what are we doing to ensure that it never happens again? There are victims of racial violence, that people have lost their property, our economy has suffered. This also affects human rights. So clearly the state has a responsibility to tell us exactly what has happened. And therefore we're hoping through this hearing that we'll be able to get to the bottom of these issues and make necessary recommendations to ensure that, the human rights are protected and the rule of law is upheld.
Right. And I suppose you've answered this question already, but perhaps it's worth asking explicitly. The inquiry itself is investigative in nature. What does that mean for the type of probing that takes place, the kind of questions that you're asking some of these key role players?
Well, the Human Rights Commission has a mandate to find appropriate redress where human rights have been violated. And in terms of our act, everybody who appears before the commission is compelled to respond and give us information, which will then help the commission to be able to make a finding. And as far as we are concerned, our findings are binding unless reversed by a court of law. But secondly, it's also a criminal offense for anyone undermine or not even to cooperate with our findings. And lastly, there's a constitutional obligation by all organs of state to support the integrity and the dignity of the Human Rights Commission and its effectiveness.
You correct me if I'm wrong, but to my understanding, the inquiry itself doesn't even have prosecutorial powers. I mean, you've already spoken about making recommendations that are then passed on. Given the extent of the work that you're doing now, would it have been easier, procedurally speaking, if the inquiry was given some kind of prosecutorial powers, at least for this particular commission?
No, because our findings will basically include what has to be done by other relevant organs of state which have been established to do the kind of work you're talking about. The police, the NPA, and the courts must do their work. But also intelligence agencies must also inform us as to exactly who was behind these issues and what is being done to identify those people and prosecute them. But secondly, people have lost their property. So how then do we also address, people who have lost a lot in terms of compensation or reparations? So our mandate is basically to ensure that the government does its work in terms of upholding human rights and the rule of law in our country.
Yeah. We've seen instances where it hasn't always been smooth sailing, even in the inquiry, so to speak. I mean, for instance, the moment with Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula comes to mind. She was speaking there in her capacity as the former defense minister, where it appears that she was taking exception to the kind of questions that were being posed to her. Again, with the benefit of hindsight, how compliant have you found some of the people giving evidence to have been as you continue your investigations?
Well, there were challenges initially where people are not availing themselves, but ultimately, once people realize that there is no other way out of this, people have to avail themselves. It is against the law it's against our act not to avail yourself. So in that sense, once people understood, they had to apply. And as I was saying, nobody has a right not to answer any question. before the commission.
As we move to Gauteng, any names that you reckon are non-negotiables, people who have to absolutely give their side of the story at the very least with that leg of the inquiry?
Well, the Minister of Police will still continue with this evidence, so will the Minister of Defense, but we will also be getting the Minister of Trade and Industry, also to give us some idea about this, as well as, the Minister of Social Development was here. We're also thinking of getting maybe 2 mayors from Durban and Pietermaritzburg to also give us a better picture about these issues. We're also talking to intelligence as well, just to give us some ideas as to what happened.
Right. Is there any particular reason why the Gauteng leg of the inquiry is only going to begin in February next year?
Well, initially we were focusing, we thought we should have the hearing in KwaZulu-Natal to cover both Gauteng and KZN. That's why we had the Premier of Gauteng appearing also whilst in Durban. But unfortunately, due to some delays and also the need to get further witnesses, we have then decided to postpone this by another week or 2 in February. But we really want to complete this thing before the end of February and March the latest.
Advocate Tseliso Thipanyane, thanks very much indeed for your time. The advocate is the CEO of the South African Human Rights Commission. Once again, thanks very much indeed.